Hello, everybody. My name is Carlos Venegas. I'm with Lean Office Innovation and Impact Washington. This is the report out for the Single Family Residence Kaizen event here in Kitsap County. Here is the agenda for today. We're going to start out by sharing the charter for the event. We're going to show you the results for the workshop. We're going to introduce the team, and the team is going to describe exactly what they've been through this week. And then we're going to talk about the next steps, and of course Larry is going to give the director comments. And then we're going to have questions and answers at the end. And my request to you is that we hold questions until after the presentation. That way it gives the team a chance to make their presentation and get through it. Okay? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mary Seals. I am the project lead for this process improvement effort. And I'm going to talk about the charter and a little bit about our report and our goals. We started this journey sometime early this year thinking that we've been working on improving pieces of the process within the department for the last few years, 5 years or so. And we decided it was time to have a holistic look, a real organized look and effort in tackling the processes we have, the permitting process in the department. So with that, we put together a charter and identified the process that we are going to tackle. And we looked at our highest volume, our big permit, which is our single family residence. It's also a broad residential permit type, so it will impact other residential permit types that we have. We decided to choose this one because it's a high volume, high priority. It's the customer perspective is that it's broken. We hear from the community that they feel that they're not getting their permits fast enough. And we identified some of the defects and costs and the cost to the customer in our charter. So some of the defects is that the submittal process is cumbersome, and we break it down, meaning we physically take everything apart and then put it back together and then pass it back out. And also that it's kind of unclear, and our triage process had kind of devolved over the years with all the changes that we've had. The cost of our current condition was that it takes a long time, or longer than we're comfortable with, to get a single family residence permit out the door. The perception and credibility of the department is also important, so we were looking at that. It's also a delay into money into the economy. If the builders can't build their houses, they can't sell them, etc. Also, the process for the customers is, the customers for the process, excuse me. The customers for the process is staff, our internal staff, also the builders, and the next generation, the people that are going to buy the houses. Our targets for this project are to reduce lead time, so reduce the time it takes to process the permit. Also to define customer satisfaction. We were talking about what was important to the customer, and we realized we didn't really know. We had some feedback from a couple of people, but we hadn't really talked to the customers. So we wanted to talk to the customers and define what's important to them, and then to develop a survey so we can track those important items. Our boundaries are just single-family residence. That's the one process that we worked with. We took out expedited reviews, which is our an exception to that process to make it a little faster, and also basics, which are kind of a template of a plan. We put together a timeline and a team. This project has been this week, July 9th through July 13th, for the Kaizen event, but there's been a lot of work leading up to this that the team has put together different pieces of information. And then we put together our teams, which included some management, but also included our frontline staff, that actually do the process, as well as our clients, which is we're lucky enough to have 3 builders from our community with us. So that's our charter. What we want to measure here are these 3 items here. Number 1 is our lead time, how long it takes. We determined that it currently takes us 26.1 days to approve a permit on average. And our goal was to reduce that by 30%, so down to 18 days to improve a permit. Also, to define customer satisfaction, we did that by calling, I think we identified 15 people that in 2012 that had received RSFR permits, single family residence permits. We called them and asked them about their experience, and based on the things that they talked about, they said we had really nice people. We said it's important to them that the staff is nice. So we developed the things that we felt were important to them through that survey, and then we developed a formal survey. And we're just about done. We're about ready to put that survey out and start using it, which is going to be exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tina Rice. She's the lead for the first part of the process. We took the process and broke it down. So here we go.
Hi, like Mary said, I'm Tina Rice. I'm the Administrative Services Manager for the Department of Community Development, and I had the good fortune of leading the sub-team for permit submittal intake. And just to show you what that entails, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Adams to show you that process and where that fits into the overall process for the RSFR submittal.
So we started with the client downloading the permit, and the client's roles are outlined in green, and we took it all the way to the reviewer being handed off the permit.
Thanks, Heather. The goals for our team, and we were fortunate enough to have customers involved in our team up front, but the goals for our team were to design a more customer-friendly lobby with some educational materials and some things for our clients to educate themselves on our process while they're waiting for permit intake. In addition to that, we wanted to look at any unnecessary steps at submittal. We clearly identified some unnecessary steps in our process, and we wanted to determine ways to get rid of those unnecessary steps. So I introduced Heather Adams. We also have Kim Shadbolt, who'll be here shortly, and she's one of our permit techs, very critical in intake process. It was good to have that voice on the team. I'm also going to walk through the as-is process, what it looks like now, as well as what is the new process going to look like. So with that, this is what it looks like when you walk into our lobby. When you walk into our lobby, there's obviously not a lot of clear signage. Where do I go? What do I do? We don't have anybody dedicated to greeting you when you walk in the door. So it's not even clear what you do when you walk in. If you look real closely under that building permit sign, there's a red little homemade stop sign there that says take a number. And interestingly enough, Heather and I were just looking through the presentation, and I noticed, and I've worked in the department for almost 6 years now, that we do have that number counter up there at the very top hanging from the ceiling, kind of far back in the back of the lobby. So really challenging to see what to do in our lobby when you walk in. In addition, once you took a number, and you would take a number even if you were just coming in to pick up your permit and it was a 5-minute thing you had to do, if our permit techs were tied up with working with our valued customers and intaking their permits, they couldn't look up and help with going to retrieve a packet or going to retrieve a issued permit. So this is what they get to look at when they're sitting in our lobby. Our brochure wall. Now, the maps are beautiful. If you look at them, there's a lot of pretty colors and a lot of interesting information. Personally, to me, I looked at it and thought, where's my house on that map? And I'm not sure what other clients are looking at when they see those maps because, for one, they're outdated. We don't have somebody focused on updating those maps and ensuring that the current maps are up there. So we started with actually looking at our brochure wall. And actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back for one step here. Before we went to our brochure wall, we talked about what makes the most sense when you walk into a lobby. What's important to our customers that we value? And to show that we value our customer, we thought it was important to acknowledge that you came to see us. So with that said, we created a check-in station up front with clear signage that this is where you check in. And we determined that with our current resources, that we could reallocate and kind of redistribute work so that we have somebody dedicated to sitting in that front station to ensure that you, our valued customer, get acknowledged when you walk into the department. And if you are submitting a permit, we can enter you into a system so that you can be called up next. But if you're here just to pick up an issued permit, we can go have that individual at check and retrieve that for you, so you don't need to wait 30 minutes. You can be done in 5 minutes. In addition, that check-in station can also look at, oh, you're here to submit an RSFR permit. Let me just make sure you have all the right documents. So it can go through that submittal checklist to ensure that you have everything you need. And if you don't have everything you need, they can get you the right form so that while you're waiting, you can fill out that form. So hopefully that enhances that experience. So like I mentioned before, clear signage that shows you where you need to go. We have a pay station. A lot of our customers don't even know that you can pay online remotely, not even come into the office, or that when you come in, you can go to this pay station and just do your credit card yourself real quickly. In addition to that, we have a resource room. It's not utilized right now. And we think it's important to fully utilize that resource room for things that are important to our clients. So current maps, one, so you can check your zoning. In addition to that, a kiosk, so that if you want to go do a parcel search and look up some information or check county code, there's a place where you can do that in our department. So with that said, we also, like I said before, took a look at our brochure wall. And those outdated maps, what can we put there to really help our customers? So I'm going to turn it over to Heather Adams and let her talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Tina. So Tina called it a brochure wall, but what we really wanted to transform this section of the wall into is a customer information wall. And that's really to respond to that input that we've had from our clients that this is important to them to have these educational materials and just give an overview of different processes that we have. So it's kind of broken out into three or four sections. It's going to be the general information, the various permit types, a media center, and just general brochures. So the general information will have things such as the plan of the day hours, Kitsap 1 contact information, DCD hours, but we've actually talked about moving that to the outside wall so that it doesn't really make sense to have it on the inside where people can't see when the door's closed. So we don't want people breaking in to see our hours, so we're going to move that to the outside. The permit types that we've broke out are kind of the major heavy hitters that we see. So we've kind of established a flow chart for each of those, and so our clients will be able to see the timelines and where they are in the process and what to expect in the future, along with associated application materials and forms that they may need. So essentially, you could come in for a single family residence, put together your own permit, and go home and fill that out. The over-the-counter portion is the middle section of the wall that we're transforming, and that's just something new that's new to DCD, that such as simple deck permits or a minor remodel that we're turning those around in a day, and we just wanted to streamline that process, have those readily available for our clients that they can just pick those up and be on their way. So that is kind of the over-the-counter portion, and then we're also going to have a television set where, as you'll see in like a doctor's office or different things, different places like that, that kind of just runs through, what's upcoming, what do I need to do for a permit, how do I get good inspections, just informational things to really respond to their inquiries about, what's next in different processes. And then finally, along the bottom is general brochures for different applications or just materials that in code that we felt was important to put in a hard copy that they can just grab and, review or have questions for staff. So that's kind of what the brochure wall is going to be transformed into. I'll turn over to Tina to talk about the intake process for our clients.
So as we talked about before, the second goal for us was to really shorten that intake process. We thought, and we heard from our customers that was important to them. So currently, this beautiful spaghetti chart reflects what it looks like, what happens to your permit when it comes in the department. So as you can see at our permit intake counters there, you've got several different lines coming out of there. And what that reflects is the amount of times our permit techs need to get up while they're working with a client to go to a printer, to print out a receipt, to go make a copy of something that might be needed in the packet, to go to the copy room, which is even further down at the bottom of that chart, to scan a document, email it to themselves, and retrieve that document electronically. So pretty silly. And we determined that was 328 feet of walking. We got the measuring tape out. We walked it 328 feet for each building permit submittal, residential building permit submittal. And from that particular portion of time where they walked in and submitted their permit to when it got to the residential review team was 80 minutes. So we think that's too long. I'm sure that our customers think that's too long. So what we did is said, there's really a a very efficient solution to this. And that's getting the technology at your desk for our permits. By doing that, by putting the right technology at the desk, which is basically a scanner, copier, printer, we reduce that walking time by 295 feet to 33 feet. And the time associated with that reduced by 34 minutes, are now down from 80 minutes to 46 minutes. So really, it's a fairly simple solution, and it's easy to implement. So we went ahead and we're going to move forward with that. We identified that's something we can do. The spaghetti chart you saw below with all the lines coming out is now just that one red line at the bottom that goes from that permit submittal station to that back workstation where any type of hard copy documents are located. So at time of submittal, the permit tech will intake, scan your permit, and anything that we're not able to scan, large plan sets, we'll retain the hard copy, but we're going to reduce for our customer multiple copies. You no longer need to bring 6 copies of this form or 4 copies of this form. We just need 1. And then it'll be available not only electronically to our permit techs, but to all of our reviewers, so they can also access that information. So the next steps, key and critical to making sure this happens. And we worked hard on these. We developed implementation plans that specifically state who's responsible for what. We brought in folks from information services, our facilities group, and all the key individuals to ensure that they had a specific role ensuring that we can implement this. We did a Kaizen newspaper, and that really identifies any action items, any issues that we've identified, could be a problem or something we need to work through. We listed those because those oftentimes get forgotten, and we don't want any of this forgotten. This was a big effort, and we want to ensure that we take care of all those things. Also, lastly, and very important to the process, is documenting these new processes and educating our staff, because it's not just 2 people affected, it's a big group of individuals, and we need to ensure that everybody understands what we're doing. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our other team lead, sub-team lead, David Lynham, to talk about the other part of the process.
Thank you. I'm David Lynham. I'm the county's fire marshal, and my role in this was to work with a group of my cohorts to take a good, hard, and in-depth look at the review process in general, but very specifically at the review functions that are involved in issuing a single-family permit. These are the nuts and bolt actions that have to take place before we can issue anything. We spent a week doing that, and it was a very hard week. I commented to several people that I was just as tired going home after this week as if I had dug fence post holes all week. But at the end of this process, we came up with 3 very big problems that we think will have a really dramatic effect on those process. And the first one of those is that our existing process has excessive wait times. And to describe those for you is Greg Spears, who is our lead building inspector.
Thank you, David. I'd like to address this chart over here, which we worked diligently this whole week. It's quite a piece of art, isn't it? We've charted out this whole process, and Heather has described this initial portion here, the intake. I'm going to take you from this point where that permit goes into the triage at this point, and then out the back side of this permit. From the point of triage, it goes into, and they disseminate and analyze the permit where it's supposed to go for the review teams. Then it goes into this portion of the chart, which is the review teams, and they go through their processes, and once they've approved their steps, then it returns on over to this section back over here, which is the outtake, and then for putting the package back together and then issuing it to the permit, to the permittee. I'd like to note the wait times on this process. First, initially, up in the intake portion, there's 2 days right there. And then we've identified a couple different areas. We have a 1-day wait down here in this section of the review, specifically in the plan review section, which I'm involved. We have an initial 8-day wait, and if there's issues, there's another 8-day wait. And a total of, a lot of waiting there, which we've identified as a total of 26 days for the whole process to occur. Thank you.
So in addition to all of the wait time that we identified, another significant problem is that staff physically transports all of the application materials between the different workstations that are spread across 2 floors. And to describe that is Tina Turner, Deputy Fire Marshal.
As you can see, the permit travels in 3 different areas: the permit center, second floor plan review, and first floor plan review. At times, the permit can travel from the first floor to the second floor several times before it's approved. The distance of this travel of this one permit is 1,304 feet.
So we know we have excessive lead times. We know that we're spread all over the department and that we transport those application materials by hand in person. We also identified a number of significant constrictions in the workflow materials through the department. And to describe those is Lisa Lewis, an environmental planner.
Thank you, David. So there are 3 pinch points in the review. One is in the permit center with intake, and then between that with triage, and then between triage when the information, the permits are given to the reviewers, and then back to intake and back to the permit center. So there's 3 pinch points that we've identified.
So we know that we take too long. We know that we're spread out all over the department. And we know that our information is constricted for workflow. We were given a number of tools to examine these and hopefully come up with some solutions during our week-long process. And to describe those, we have Heather Cowan, who is the Assistant Director of Community Development for City of Bremerton.
Thanks. So our analysis was done through I better move that. Can't see that very well. We did what was called a root cause analysis, and in shorthand, this is the 5 whys. We took each of our problem statements, in this particular case, the fact that wait time is excessive, and kind of went through this iterative process of, well, why is it excessive? Why is it? And came to a root cause of, in this particular case, that a specific time frame had never been a policy. There wasn't an idea about here's how long it should take, and an understanding of that across the department. And so as we identified the root cause, we would then come up with at least 5 ideas for each of those root causes for what we can do about it. What we found across the board was that there was one kind of overarching idea about how to solve several of the problems that we were finding, and that was to develop something called a development review team, where you have all the people who are involved in the process coming together more often, communicating more frequently, coordinating their efforts in terms of inspections and that sort of thing. And not only that, but also physically being located next to each other so that that communication could be easier.
So once we've defined our problems, we've identified ways to fix it, we needed to have a new way to do work, because obviously the old process wasn't working for us. And we have Greg back to describe to you what the new process looks like.
Thanks again. So we go back to our old chart here. We have this menagerie of Post-its here that kind of tell us what our review process is. We've looked at that, and it's about 146 steps that we've identified. And through looking at that, we've been able to eliminate over 35% of those steps over to a new streamlined review process down at the other end here. If you want to look. Here is where we receive, this is kind of a replacement of triage, and with a review team. where each permit will be assigned a team leader. Now, a team leader in the review team initially review the permit, and when there's no issues, which comes up about to this point, it can be immediately reviewed and approved right there and put into the docket for issuance that same day, which is a dramatic reduction in wait time. If there's issues, then the permit goes down to another process, which is duplicated through each of the review groups. This process then, after information is given, is gone through review, is then approved, and goes back to the team leader who puts it back together as a package and readies the permit for issuance. Now, the markedly noted reduction in what wait and review process time changes from over there a 26-day process to what we anticipate about an 18-day process. Thank you.
So after defining a new way to work, we got to have a new space to do this work. And to describe those changes for you, it's Tina Turner again.
By relocating the second floor plan reviewers and the first floor plan reviewers into one pod, we have gone from 1,304 feet down to 160 feet traveling distance per permit.
So now we have a new process, we have a new way to work, and it has had probably the most significant impact on the workflow of the products through the department. And to describe those changes is Lisa Lewis.
Remember the painful pinch points, because they're gone. Intake and review are together. We're together on the same floor, we're communicating together, and we're working together. And one thing that is very different is that intake, or the permit techs, are now a part of the reviewer team.
And then lastly, we don't want to lose track of where we've been this last week. And oftentimes when we do things like this, it culminates in a report that sits on a bookshelf somewhere. So one of the things that we did right away was to document this new process, because we're going to go home over the weekend and we probably won't think much about this. Maybe we will. But come Monday morning, we want to make for sure that when we reassemble, everybody remembers what that process is over there with all of those sticky notes. So in addition to that, we came up with an implementation plan, because you can have the best plan in the world and it does no good if you don't know how it's going to be implemented. And we created very specific implementation plans here that identify specific steps that must be done, who has to do it, and when they have to be completed by. Lastly, Tina mentioned something called a Kaizen newspaper, and it's not really a newspaper, but it's another tool that we're going to use that identifies issues that are involved. Now, we've sat up here for a week and we've dreamt up great ideas, but we're not that naive to think that we're not going to run into just a host of problems when we start to implement that. So some of the things that we're doing is to anticipate what those issues might be. So as we identify those and record them, we're going to track them, we're going to assign who is responsible for resolving those, and establish timeframes by when they should be resolved.
Okay, thank you. Now, while you're talking, I'll pick that up. Okay.
Well, I'm Larry Keaton. I'm the Director of Community Development. And, you know, I'm bringing up pieces of paper because if I don't do this, I'll forget people's names. And I think we owe a round of thanks to a lot of folks. So bear with me as I thank folks first. First of all, to Carlos and Roger Milliman from Impact Washington. If they hadn't come to help us put this together, we'd still be doing the 5 years of process improvement department has done has been on these individual basis. And I think this is the first time we've been able to sit down and do it in a holistic way with the benefit of having our client in the room, which I'm going to thank them too, because it's critical who we're here to serve. And it was an interesting thing is when we first started the process early in the week, it's us against them. And it's usually government against everybody else, if you understand. If in the building community, it seems. The reality is it's not. It's really the building community plus government, because we have a role to play, to do a service to the citizen who ends up living in that house. And we talked about our next generation. You know, we build a house for the first family. Well, those houses tend to last, because our construction industry is so good, tend to last anywhere from 50 to 100 years. So you're looking at multi-generations living in a house, in a structure that's safe. So I want to thank the Home Builders Association, and particularly Justin Ingalls and Carla Cook and Jim Way for participating in this, taking time out of their busy schedules to come in and make sure we got it right, or at least giving us things and ideas. And I heard Carla make a comment earlier. What about inspections? That's coming. We're going to deal with inspections. The second thing I want to do is thank the county commissioners. Often the government, you know, the county commissioners get beat up a lot, but if it hadn't been for them and giving us the funding to bring in an outside team to do this, we wouldn't be able to do it, because we just don't get a lot of money for these kinds of things. And so I think the commissioners need to be thanked well for providing this. And not only that, but they've made it a department requirement to do this for 2013, to continue the lean process. Now, I hope the cameras, you've seen the chart on the side of the wall. That's government regulation that starts at the federal level. And it comes down to local governments to implement, whether we like it or not. That's where it starts. The building code, the environmental code, the energy code, all of those things didn't start here in, Port Orchard. They started back in Washington, D.C. And it was a demand of the public, whether we like that or not, but it was the public who demanded this code. And over the years, it continues to grow, it continues to refine. The problem has been how we process permits, at least for us. And so I think the team has done an excellent job in putting together what that steps and process are. In fact, the one thing I'm going to say as the sponsor and as the commitment of the board, we're going to continue this. This is the new way of life in DCD. We will continue to analyze. We'll continue to look at ways to do better. 18 days may be great this year. Maybe next year it's 5 days. Just depends on what we're doing. So I want to thank the team, and Carlos and Roger and Carla, and for the HBA and the others for the great work, because it really leads the business for us and hopefully becomes a model not only for the rest of our department, it will be a model for the rest of our department, but hopefully the rest of county government to see the benefits of doing this, to provide a better level of service to our citizens. Nobody wants to pay more taxes, to include Keaton, so I got to tell you, we got to find better ways. And again, thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Larry. Now let's open it up for questions, and we're recording this, so if you have a question, I'm going to hand you the microphone. And I didn't mean that to kind of scare you off to ask questions.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful presentation. I'm Patty Charnas with the DCD Environmental Programs Division, and Tina's and Heather's presentation about the information wall. Let's make that information wall educational and informative. I've a couple of quick questions. Are those lanes or those columns, I guess there were 6 columns, have they been, decided by the group as being the best columns, or can we continue to look to provide some additional information? And as long as I got it, the brochures that are on the bottom, do they align with each of those columns? Because if I were a member of the public utilizing that time while I was waiting, I don't want to be confused by looking at the flow and then getting a brochure that doesn't relate to it. Pretty specific, but I thought I'd ask.
I think the first important thing to point out is that's a living wall. It's never going to be set in stone. Things that are important to our clients can change over time depending on code changes or just what's important at that particular time. And so if those aren't the right sections, we'll know those aren't the right sections, we'll collaborate about it, and we'll ensure that that information that's up there is something that our client is interested in. And we'll look for feedback constantly to have that wall evolve and meet the needs of our customers and our clients. Hopefully that answered your question.
The alignment of the brochures to the...
The alignment of the brochures, actually what we were considering doing was including the brochures were pertinent to that particular section would be in that section. And the brochures along the bottom would be the general brochures that really weren't identified with a certain section. So if you want to build a single-family residence, you go to that section and you get everything you need, including all application materials and brochures.
This might be more of a comment than a question. I'm Bud Harris, Director of Information Services and Facilities Maintenance. So as you gave your presentation, you talked about needing support from those two entities. I want to assure you that I'm behind you 100%. As Larry knows, I'm a huge advocate of business process improvement, which is exactly what this has all been about, and I agree. I think you've done a great job. And I'm also a huge advocate of total cost of ownership operation. I think it's government's responsibility to provide quality services at the least cost possible. And so those are the two pedestals, I guess I would say, that I firmly believe in, and I know through conversations, Larry and I both have similar views of the world. But again, thank you for your time and effort. I know these things aren't easy, and when the time comes, given fitting in with other schedules, we will be there to help you as best we can and as timely as we can.
So I'm Scott Diener, Policy and Planning Manager for DCD. I was hoping to learn a little more detail about what we would see Monday morning when we walk in terms of implementation, if you're ready to share that.
Well, one of the things that's going to be critical to this is that we're going to have a stand-up meeting. At 8:30 in the morning, everybody who's involved in touching this review process is going to meet back up at the new review center, the new review pod, and we're going to take out our implementation plan and see what needs to be done and who needs to do it. We don't anticipate that taking more than about 10 or 15 minutes, but then everyone's going to have their marching directions for the day. They're going to be back Tuesday at 8:30. They're going to be back Wednesday at 8:30. And really, that's probably something that's just going to stay standing from the way they are. I don't recall the time, but we're meeting again with Information Services on Monday morning to begin some of the implementation, because we can physically move people. We're not changing the physical plant an awful lot, but we are changing where people are going to sit. And we are activating multiple workstations. So before we can physically establish somebody in a new workstation, we have to get those people out. So you're going to see a lot of cleaning upstairs. You're going to see a lot of things moving, and you're going to see stuff in the garbage can, I hope, too. But the first thing you're going to see is cleaning, then you're going to see implementation. But the immediate impact for you, other managers, is you're going to lose those people for about 10 minutes every morning this next week. Is that enough? Okay.
I will add that the kinds of changes that they're talking about do take more than just the folks in the room. And while we were cooking up all these ideas this week, IT and facilities came in and helped us kind of formulate how we're going to implement this, through their services. And we have actually calculated the schedule for IT and facilities. And I believe, if that's correct, we're going to be implementing some of this through facilities and IT this week, or next week. Yeah, next week. So you'll actually see physical things happening. What are the questions?
Sure. I think it was on Monday I heard Mary say that we might want to consider thinking about how our team is described, and it shouldn't be just DCD and then everybody else. It should be DCD and the applicant, and in this instance, the client is the home builder. Is the home buyer. So how are we working on, which I thought was really a great way to look at this, and I was hoping that was discussed more, and if so, then how are we looking at getting that message out?
You're right, Scott. One of the things that we looked at, in addition to our value mapping, but we kind of looked at a whole overall process stream. And it's important to remember that the government insertion, in this case, building department, is really part of that process team. And a big light bulb, I think, for a lot of us was that Previously, we may have thought that we're in the business of building permits, but we too are really in the business of building homes. We just have to make for sure that we are inserted at the proper time within the whole process map from the time somebody acquires an idea they want a new home until the time that they moved in. And some of the input that we received from people who use our services is really, when do you need this thing? And we still don't know. So it just takes more interaction with the people we've already worked with to find out what products we need to produce to you by what time. And I don't think we got far enough down in the marketing plan besides just digging in and finding out more information yet.
So that is a good question, and we'll make sure that that is on our Kaizen newspaper, part of the action item list. Thank you. Other questions, please?
Thank you, Carlos. Roger Melliman with Impact Washington. Well, first, I'd like to thank the commissioners for having the wisdom to say process improvement is important. Also to your treasurer, Meredith Green, the champion within Kitsap, who's been beating this drum for quite some time, and Larry, of course, for you and your leadership with DCD to Higher Impact Washington. Thank you very much. What this team has gone through today is a process and created a current state, which was a future state, but now it's a current state of what they're going to achieve. And as Larry was saying earlier, this is a journey where it'll be looked at again and again as a process and make continuous improvements. I also like to thank Carlos Venegas for a great facilitation this week and the team for participating. Thank you very much.
What other comments or questions? Okay, well, I'll have the last word then. I do want to say that we really had a great team. And I'm not just saying that because I'm standing up here with a client. I do a lot of these, and it's almost axiomatic that on Tuesday I'm going to run into huge resistance. In fact, I just plan on it. In fact, I wear a particular tie that symbolizes the anxiety that the team usually experiences on Tuesday and doesn't end until Wednesday afternoon. And this team did not display any of that. They were probably among the most, I don't know what the right word is, just absolutely ready for change that I've run into. And they embraced it. And I have very, very optimistic hopes that this is going to be very well implemented, and not just implemented, but that this team is going to take the changes that they've made and improve upon those. So thank you very much for the experience.